what do you do when you find yourself between a rock and a hard place? We all know what that feels like. We all know what it means to be in times where it's confusing and it seems like there's only bad options. Well, what's up, friends? Steven here once again in the Arctic Hope studio. Great to be with you today. It's been a hot minute since I've made a Hope on Demand video. Today is one of the first ones I've made in a couple months. It's been a busy summer, but we're back now. Folks, it's so great to be with you, man. I trust you're doing well. It's a great time to be alive. Great time to be, curious about God, I guess is a nice way of saying it. But in these videos, the whole idea is that I talk about the Bible, I talk about Scripture, I talk about things that I want you to be encouraged, right? There's lots to be encouraged about. There's lots to consider. There's lots to think about. And one thing that I want to talk about today is found in Exodus 14. At this point in time, Moses and the whole nation of Israel, they are now leaving. They're now leaving Egypt, right? And so the whole story here is really interesting because one of the things you discover, and in how this applies to our lives in a practical way, is, what do you do when you find yourself between a rock and a hard place? We all know what that feels like. We all know what it means to be in times where it's confusing and it seems like there's only bad options. Moses very much found himself in this scenario. In fact, the entire nation of Israel found themselves in this scenario. And the gist of it is, you read, from Exodus 1 through to about 12. You read that Pharaoh and his entire Egyptian army, they're now chasing Israel. Israel has just left Egypt. And God tells them to camp at this spot geographically that is very vulnerable, right? The nation of Israel, there was lots of elders, lots of children and babies. They weren't soldiers, they weren't an army, they were just people. And now, their back is to the sea, and in front of them is this very, very angry army coming to kill them all. And what do you do when you find yourself in these scenarios? Well, it's important, I think. You read in verse 1, it says, "Then God gave these instructions to Moses." For our lives, you need to understand that God actually has great plans for your life, man. He wants great things for you. Number one thing that we need to be doing, I think, as often as we can, is just saying, God, what do you want me to be doing in this season? What do you have for me? What's the plan here? Right? Because God had a plan for Moses, had a plan for the entire nation of Israel, and God has a plan for you. And it doesn't always make sense. Right, it can be a little confusing, and you might feel like you're receiving instruction from something that you can't see, and that's a weird thing because it requires a lot of trust. So number one thing to do in times in our lives where it's odd and it's confusing is you need to be receiving instruction. You need to be praying. You need to be asking God, what do I do here? But then secondly, Moses said to the people in verse 13, "Don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm." One thing I love about Moses is he finds himself in this really odd place, finds himself, as leader of a massive body of people, lots of responsibility, lots at risk, and really no way out. But because he knew God, because he knew this person in Jesus, because he knew that he would be fine if he just chose to trust God, because of those things, God led the entire nation of Israel out of harm's way, led them into safety. And it was this whole journey of this people coming into the promises that God had told them he would do. So, big encouragement to you. If you find yourself in a season right now where you're not sure what to do, you can kind of fill in the blanks and just say, Steven, X, Y, and Z. These are things that I'm really concerned about. Pray. Find yourself quiet with God and just say, Lord, what's the plan here? And when God gives you instruction, your only job is not to worry, it's not to stress, it's not to freak out. Your only job is to say, God, I trust in you. And when you do that, folks, what we find here is that we come into a place of peace. We come into a place of just saying, you know what, everything's going to be fine. It doesn't look fine, but because God is with me, because God is the one leading my steps right now, everything will be just fine. So love you guys. See you in the next video. Subscribe to the Arctic Hope Project YouTube channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you in the next video. Peace.